In June 2016, 52% of the British electorate voted to leave the European Union, a decision framed as the reclaiming of sovereignty, borders, and economic independence. But today, nearly a decade later, a growing body of economists, policy analysts, and geopolitical observers argue that Brexit is not just a political miscalculation, but perhaps the most damaging economic error in modern British history. The UK now faces weaker economic performance than at any time in the past half-century. The cost of living crisis is up, growth has stagnated, and migration, ironically, has increased rather than fallen. More than £100 billion in annual GDP is estimated to have been lost relative to staying in the EU. The promised economic renaissance has failed to materialise, while the UK's voice on the global stage has diminished by measurable degrees. But what exactly makes Britain regret leaving the European Union? One of the most powerful arguments for Brexit was border control. Supporters promised that leaving the EU would allow the UK to reduce immigration and take back control of its borders. Yet the data tells a completely different story. Channel crossings reached their highest ever levels after Brexit. In 2022, more than 45,000 people crossed the English Channel in small boats, up from just 299 in 2018, a staggering increase of more than 15,000%. Even after temporary decreases, annual arrivals remain well above pre-Brexit norms. In the first 11 months of 2025, more than 39,292 people crossed the English Channel in small boats from France, an increase of approximately 6.7%, with 1 month remaining, compared to 36,816 crossings the previous year. This happened because Brexit removed the UK from the Dublin regulation, which previously allowed Britain to return asylum seekers to the first EU country they passed through. Once the UK left that framework, it lost the legal mechanism that enabled rapid returns. As a result, the incentive for small boat crossings intensified rather than diminished. Furthermore, the UK's post-Brexit points-based immigration system, which was designed to reduce numbers, ironically opened new categories for skilled and semi-skilled labour. The result, net migration exceeded 600,000 people in 2022, far higher than the average of around 250,000 during the UK's last decade inside the EU. In short, Brexit did not tighten Britain's borders. It created legal gaps, removed enforcement tools, and accelerated migration pressures that are now symbolised by the images of overcrowded boats crossing one of the world's busiest waterways. The UK's cost of living crisis is often blamed on global inflation, pandemic disruptions, and geopolitics, but Brexit added a uniquely British layer to the problem. Before Brexit, the UK enjoyed frictionless trade with the EU, which accounted for nearly 50% of all British imports. After leaving the single market, new customs checks, regulatory barriers, and transport delays introduced additional costs for nearly every sector. Studies estimate that Brexit-related red tape has raised food prices by 6% on average since 2020, equivalent to an additional £250 per household per year. Some categories, like dairy and meat, have seen price increases of 10 to 15% directly attributable to trade friction rather than inflation alone. For British exporters, the picture is equally troubling. In the first 2 years after Brexit took effect, UK exports of goods to the EU fell by 14%, while EU exports to the UK declined by only 7%, reflecting a structural advantage for the larger trading bloc. These deficits feed directly into higher domestic prices, weaker industrial output, and reduced competitiveness. Even energy prices have been affected. The UK's exit from the EU energy market and interconnector agreements increased volatility and reduced bargaining power. Analysts estimate this added between 2% and 5% to wholesale electricity costs during the 2021 to 2023 period. Every layer of the cost of living crisis, food, energy, trade friction, and currency weakness intensifies the pressure on British families. Brexit did not create the crisis, but it magnified it, turning economic turbulence into structural hardship. Perhaps the most measurable consequence of Brexit is its effect on long-term economic growth. Many economists warned that leaving the EU would shrink the UK economy by reducing investment, limiting access to skilled workers, and increasing trade barriers. By 2023, the UK economy was estimated to be 4 to 5% smaller than it would have been without Brexit, representing an annual loss of roughly £40 billion. Business investment has stagnated since the referendum, remaining 25% below pre-2016 trends. The British pound has still not recovered to its pre-Brexit trading trading levels. The initial shock saw sterling fall by nearly 12%, and although it stabilized, the currency's weaker position has made imports, everything from machinery to consumer goods, more expensive. Trade intensity also declined sharply. Between 2019 and 2023, UK trade openness fell by 8%, while comparable economies such as France and the Netherlands experienced declines of only 1 to 2% in the same period. This divergence highlights that Britain's slowdown cannot be attributed solely to global conditions. Geopolitically, the UK now negotiates trade deals from a position of reduced leverage. The long-promised global Britain pivot has yet to deliver significant economic gains. The UK's trade agreement with Australia, for example, is projected to increase GDP by just 0.08% over 15 years, an almost negligible bump compared to the lost benefits of EU membership. The cumulative effect is a quieter but more profound reality. The UK is becoming a slower-growing, less competitive economy, increasingly reliant on imports and struggling to attract investment, and in a global environment defined by large economic blocs, the United States, the EU, and China. Britain's isolation has diminished its geopolitical weight. Its voice in European politics has been replaced by the influence of an external observer rather than a central participant. Brexit was sold as a path to sovereignty, prosperity, and renewed global relevance. Instead, it has produced record migration across the English Channel, contributed to the worst cost of living crisis in a generation, and slowed long-term economic growth by measurable, lasting percentages. For many historians and economists, Brexit is not merely a policy failure. It represents a turning point where a major world power voluntarily stepped away from its most advantageous economic position. Whether Brexit is truly the biggest mistake in UK history will be debated for decades, but the numbers, the trends, and the geopolitical consequences are clear. The cost of leaving the European Union continues to rise, while the promised benefits remain elusive. And as Britain navigates a new era of economic and political uncertainty, one question will define the nation's future. Was the price of sovereignty worth the loss of stability?